The definition of authorized person is not specifically defined in the National Electrical Code, so it is up to the local authority having jurisdiction to determine who is considered authorized to control emergency lighting. However, the NEC does provide some guidance in section 700.12c, which states that switches or switches installed in emergency lighting circuit shall be arranged so that only authorized persons will have control of emergency lighting. This suggests that the AHA should consider the level of knowledge and training of the person who will be controlling the emergency lighting when making their determination. In this specific case, the PM believes that anyone allowed into the secured areas, that is, non-public areas, could be considered authorized. This interpretation is reasonable, as these individuals are likely to have some level of knowledge and training about the building and its systems. However, the belief that the authorized person needs to be some sort of maintenance personnel that understands when they turn off a switch controlling emergency egress lighting, that area will be left in the dark during an outage. This interpretation is also reasonable, as maintenance personnel are more likely to have the necessary knowledge and training to safely operate emergency lighting systems. Ultimately, the decision of who is considered an authorized person is up to the AHA. However, the NEC provides some guidance that can help the AHA make this determination. Emergency lighting systems are crucial for safety during power outages or other emergencies, providing illumination for evacuation routes and essential tasks. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, sets standards for the installation and control of these systems to ensure their reliability and effectiveness. One key aspect is the control of emergency lighting circuits, specifically who is authorized to operate the switches that control these lights. Since the NEC doesn't explicitly define authorized person, the responsibility falls to the authority having jurisdiction, or OJ, to make the determination. The AHA is typically a local electrical inspector or building official. When deciding who is authorized to control emergency lighting, the AHA needs to consider several factors. Firstly, the NEC section 700.12c mandates that emergency lighting circuit switches must be arranged so only authorized persons have control. This implies that access to these switches should be restricted and that those who operate them should possess the necessary knowledge and training. Secondly, the AHA must weigh the perspectives of different stakeholders. For example, a project manager might argue that anyone with access to secured areas should be considered authorized, reasoning that these individuals have some familiarity with the building's systems. However, others might argue that only maintenance personnel should be authorized, as they have specialized knowledge of electrical systems and the consequences of turning off emergency lighting. Thirdly, the AHA should consider the potential consequences of unauthorized access to emergency lighting controls. If someone unfamiliar with the system turns off the lights during an emergency, it could create dangerous conditions and hinder evacuation efforts. Fourthly, the AHA should assess the training and qualifications of potential authorized personnel. Maintenance personnel typically receive training in electrical safety and system operation, making them well suited for this role. However, other individuals, such as security guards or facility managers, might also possess the necessary knowledge and training. Fifthly, the AHA may establish specific procedures for controlling emergency lighting, such as requiring a written log of switch operations or implementing a lockout-tagout system to prevent accidental shutdowns. These procedures can help ensure that only authorized personnel operate the switches and that the system remains reliable. Let's delve deeper into some of the considerations that the AHA might take into account. The level of access to the area where the emergency lighting controls are located is important. If the controls are in a publicly accessible area, it's crucial to restrict access to prevent unauthorized operation. This might involve placing the switches in a locked cabinet or behind a restricted access panel. The training and knowledge of the individuals who have access to the area are also critical. If the area is accessible to a wide range of personnel, it's less likely that all of them will have the necessary understanding of the emergency lighting system. The specific responsibilities of the individuals who might need to operate the switches should also be considered. For example, security personnel might need to turn off emergency lighting in certain situations, such as during a fire alarm reset. In such cases, they should receive appropriate training and authorization. The complexity of the emergency lighting system itself can also influence the AHA decision. If the system is simple and straightforward, it might be reasonable to authorize a wider range of personnel to operate the switches. However, if the system is complex and requires specialized knowledge, it's best to restrict access to trained maintenance personnel. The AHA may also consider the building's emergency plan and how it addresses the control of emergency lighting. The plan should clearly identify who is responsible for operating the switches and under what circumstances. Furthermore, the AHA might consult with other stakeholders such as the building owner, facility manager, and electrical contractor to gather input and ensure that the decision is appropriate for the specific building and its occupants. The AHA decision should be documented in writing and communicated to all relevant parties. This documentation should clearly identify who is authorized to control emergency lighting and any specific procedures that must be followed. Regular inspections and audits of the emergency lighting system can help ensure that the controls are properly maintained and that only authorized personnel are operating them. These inspections can also identify any potential hazards or vulnerabilities in the system. Here are some additional points to consider regarding emergency lighting systems and the NEC. Firstly, the NEC requires that emergency lighting systems be designed to provide illumination for a minimum of 90 minutes in the event of a power outage. Secondly, the NEC also specifies the minimum illumination levels that must be maintained in various areas such as exit routes, corridors, and stairwells. Thirdly, emergency lighting systems must be powered by a reliable source, such as a generator or battery backup system. Fourthly, the NEC requires that emergency lighting systems be tested regularly to ensure that they are functioning properly. Fifthly, the testing frequency varies depending on the type of system, but it typically involves monthly and annual tests. Sixthly, the NEC also addresses the placement and type of emergency lighting fixtures. Seventhly, the fixtures must be located in areas where they will provide adequate illumination for evacuation. Eighthly, the fixtures must be designed to withstand the environmental conditions in which they are installed. Ninthly, the NEC provides specific requirements for the wiring and overcurrent protection of emergency lighting circuits. Tenthly, these requirements are designed to ensure that the circuits remain operational during a power outage. In summary, the control of emergency lighting is a critical aspect of building safety. The AHA plays a vital role in determining who is authorized to operate the switches that control these lights, considering factors such as the knowledge and training of potential operators, the accessibility of the controls, and the complexity of the system. By carefully considering these factors and following the guidance provided in the NEC, the AHA can help ensure that emergency lighting systems are reliable and effective in protecting building occupants during emergencies. The absence of a specific definition in the NEC provides flexibility for the AHA to adapt to the unique circumstances of each building. However, this flexibility also requires careful consideration and a thorough understanding of the potential risks and benefits of different approaches. Regular communication and collaboration between the AHA, building owner, facility manager, and electrical contractor are essential for ensuring that the emergency lighting system meets the needs of the building and its occupants. The focus must always be on ensuring the safety of individuals during an emergency situation and that the emergency lighting system functions as intended during a catastrophic event. The emergency plan needs to be very clear in how this all functions and who the authorized personnel are, as well as where the locations are and any special considerations to be had. The building staff, or select building staff, should also have refresher training on how the emergency lighting system works. Furthermore, this training should be logged, with the date and the staff member's name for compliance. The electrical plan should be readily available and accessible and also very clear as to the emergency lighting circuit plans. If there are any modifications, they should be promptly and professionally documented and stored with the original plans. The electrical contractors used for these modifications should be licensed and reputable and should be able to provide the correct documentation. The AHA would take this into consideration during any inspection. There are other things to consider for the AHA. Firstly, the type of occupancy of the building. Secondly, a hospital will have different considerations than an office building, for instance. Thirdly, the number of occupants is a factor as well. Fourthly, a large building will need more planning than a small building. Fifthly, is it high-rise or low-rise? Sixthly, is it a building with hazardous materials? Seventhly, the AHA will have to consult other codes and standards, such as the International Building Code or IBC. Eighthly, the AHA will have to consider local amendments to the NEC. Ninthly, the AHA should always prioritize safety and ensure that the emergency lighting system is designed and installed in accordance with the applicable codes and standards. Tenthly, documentation is key. The documentation should be made available to building staff and occupants. These are all important considerations for the AHA to consider.